All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Kearns, and I'll be your moderator tonight. First and foremost, welcome to this community outreach meeting on March 9th, 2022 for Coastal Roots LLC, a proposed marijuana product manufacturer and Tier 3 marijuana cultivator. The facility is proposed to be located at 374 West Street, Unit B in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, 01569. Today we have with us Quinn Heath as a representative from Coastal Roots. The meeting will open with a presentation on the proposed establishment, followed by an opportunity for community engagement and questions. We ask that you hold all questions until the end of the presentation, at which point I'll open the floor. And with that, I'll let Quinn take it away.
Thanks. As Nathan said, this is a community outreach meeting, so we're just giving some initial information on a proposed cannabis location in Uxbridge. As Nathan said, this is going to be Coastal Roots LLC, located at 374 West Street in Uxbridge, Massachusetts. Coastal Roots is applying for two separate licenses, a Tier 3 indoor cultivation license and a product manufacturing license. The Tier 3 cultivation license would permit them to cultivate up to 20,000 square feet of canopy. That's a relatively small establishment when you consider the Tier 11, the largest tier cultivation facility in Massachusetts, allows you to cultivate up to 100,000 square feet. So the cultivation will be indoor, and then there will also be product manufacturing at this establishment. So product manufacturing is another relatively low impact use. It's similar to an industrial kitchen, really, where you see a lot of processing of plant material into different types of products, such as edibles or oil extracts that are used in the industry. Since Coastal Roots is also going to be able to cultivate while they're product manufacturing at this establishment, that will help them keep down the number of vehicle trips that are required, since they'll be able to do both of these kind of activities under the same property. So that's the first piece of information that we're legally required to cover, the types of marijuana establishment to be located at the proposed address. So now we'll move on to the second item that we have to cover at this meeting. That would be information adequate to demonstrate that the location will be maintained securely. So as an indoor cultivator and product manufacturer, along with any other type of marijuana establishment in Massachusetts, Coastal Roots has to follow the security standards that are set forth by the Cannabis Control Commission and the state regulations at 935 CMR 500. Specifically, the citation is 500.110 section 6. There's a lot of different security requirements that Coastal Roots will have to adhere to, so I'm just going to summarize some of the important ones that you might find interesting. So there will be security camera coverage, and really that has to be coverage over all of the entryways and windows into the facility. There's a lot of requirements about how detailed that the security video has to be. It has to be 24/7 coverage with failure notifications of any movement. All of the areas that contain marijuana or cash have to have video cameras, and there needs to be HD footage where you can get a clear image of any time with a time and date stamp. And you also have to save the recordings for 90 days or longer if there's any reason for law enforcement or the Cannabis Control Commission to be doing an investigation. So really, there's going to be detailed records of anyone who's coming or going from this facility and anyone who's working there. And really all of the product is going to be safe and secured and kept track of. In addition to these security requirements, there's also going to have to be an alarm system, including perimeter alarms on both the doors and the windows, as well as panic alarm buttons for the staff members in case there was an incident that occurred. Every marijuana establishment in Massachusetts has to have what are called limited access areas. So anywhere that there's marijuana being stored or processed, those areas have to be limited. The public can't access them. It really can only be people who have been vetted, background checked by the commission, and given an ID card. So there are a lot of different security mechanisms in place here to make sure that the location is secured. Finally, anyone who's visiting this facility is going to have to be 21 years old. No one can enter the facility if they're not 21 years old, and they also need to have a valid reason to be there. They need to be signed in. There's different procedures to make sure that anyone who's not an employee is really being kept track of. And anyone who is an employee is going to have an access card, and there's going to be logs of when people enter those limited access areas and when they leave them. And there's going to be commercial grade locks on all of these limited access areas. So that covers the second point that we needed to cover, information about the security. The third item that we need to cover tonight is steps taken by the marijuana establishment to prevent diversion to minors. This is something that Coastal Roots takes very seriously, as well as the Cannabis Control Commission. There's a lot of state regulations in place too to make sure that minors are not getting access to these products. So as stated before, no one who's not 21 years old will be allowed to enter the facility. But in addition to that, as a cultivator and product manufacturer, I think it's important to note that the transactions happening are going to be between businesses. We're going to be selling either plant products or manufactured marijuana goods to other businesses for further sale. Since there won't be members of the public coming into this building, it makes it a lot easier to keep it secure and ensure that there's nobody coming in, 21 years old or otherwise. In addition to all of those security steps, all of the products that are being used by this facility and grown and sold have to be tracked from seed to sale. So from the very beginning of a plant growth up until when it's given to a consumer and sold to another business, those plants are tracked in a statewide database known as Metric. If there was an incident where a retailer, for example, that Coastal Roots is working with was diverting product to minors, could be tracked down by the commission, and Coastal Roots would take steps to terminate that relationship if such an event did happen. All right, so now I'll move on to item 4. So that's the plan by the marijuana establishment to positively impact the community. So there's a lot of different ways that cannabis establishments can positively impact the community, but this is specifically about the positive impact plan. Every cannabis establishment that applies for a license is required to have a plan, and that plan has to be how they plan to positively impact people who have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs. Coastal Roots right now has a 2-part plan. So the first part of that would be a monetary donation to an organization that works with veterans who have been impacted directly by the war on drugs, and gives them a lot of access to information and training and skills that are important in that area. Secondly, Coastal Roots plans to work with experts on record sealing in order to help individuals who have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs through criminal records. For example, if there's a drug crime that's been decriminalized on your record, there's opportunities to get that removed. It's an issue of getting access to a lawyer who's an expert in that, or a community organization. So part of Coastal Roots Positive Impact Plan is to connect people with those services, which is a really important part of addressing the harms of the war on drugs. And just some additional impact on this Positive Impact Plan. The commission requires every cannabis company to address the negative impacts, as I said, but they define that in specific ways. So they want Coastal Roots to help people who have had past criminal convictions for cannabis possession, for example, their spouses or family members, or individuals who live in one of the 29 areas that the Cannabis Control Commission has defined as an area of disproportionate impact based on studies that they have commissioned. So that brings us to our final point that we need to cover at this meeting before we move to the public comment section, and that's going to be information adequate to demonstrate that this location is not going to be a nuisance, as that term is defined by law. So as part of the permitting and business strategy of Coastal Roots, they're going to be taking steps to mitigate traffic and parking concerns of the community. As I said, we're going to have both product manufacturing and cultivation under one roof, but there's not going to be retail consumers in and out of this facility. So traffic is really not a major concern here. And it's definitely something that Coastal Roots would be paying attention to. Odor control is another big question that we're asked about a lot in these meetings. And that's definitely something that Coastal Roots will be taking steps to mitigate. In fact, if odor is getting out of a facility, it can actually be a bad thing for the facility, because that means that microbes and other contaminants are getting in. So there definitely will be steps taken to look at possible air filtering or other solutions to keep odor out of the community. Just because you're a marijuana operator and you have a marijuana license, that doesn't give you any kind of extra ability to be a nuisance. You can't operate a stinky business that smells up the whole neighborhood. There's ways that you can legally get recourse around that. There's nuisance laws and there's local bylaws on odor perhaps that address the issues of odor. But that's definitely a concern that Coastal Roots is aware of, and will be taking steps to make sure that it is not a major impact on your community. So that covers the 5 items that I needed to legally cover at this meeting. If we have anyone from the public now, we'll move on to the public comment section. Otherwise, we will have Nathan close us out. Thanks.
Thanks, Quinn. As we have no members of the public in attendance tonight, I believe we are good to call this meeting for Coastal Roots. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Have a great night.